Red Bull have broken the budget cap in 2021, and now they're waiting for their punishment. Will they get a points deduction and lose Verstappen's first championship? Or will they lose aero time and future budget? Or will the FIA do absolutely nothing because the rules were so new? Let's dive into the subject and find out. But first, what punishment do you think Red Bull should face? Let us know in the comments below. Want to know what Red Bull had to say about FIA's verdict? Make sure to watch until the end of the video to find out what Horner and Red Bull had to say. So, the FIA stated that Red Bull exceeded the Formula 1 cost cap regulations in their statement on Monday, but it made no mention of any sanction of any type, which is what has caused the most concern and anxiety when it was known a breach would be revealed. There are still a lot of unanswered questions in a tale that has already carried on longer than many in F1 feel it should have, even though the phrasing of the FIA's update provided plenty of room for interpretation and did provide us with some answers. Considering this, we have endeavoured to address and respond to the serious questions that remain, while some are still more challenging than others. How much did Red Bull overspend and how serious is the breach? The term minor breach could give the impression that the overspending is insignificant. However, given that it may be eligible for anything less than 5% of the cost cap for 2021, that amount could still be higher than $7 million. We don't know the extent of the overspending, and we won't be able to assess its seriousness until we do. However, even a minor violation can have a big impact. Thus, it would be incorrect to brush it off based on how the financial regulations are worded, which define procedural, minor, and material violations. The difference between an overspend of, say, $100,000 and one that might be a couple of million or higher is tremendous. We therefore cannot be certain until the number is made public, and only then is it possible to suggest what would be the best way to punish the team. We do know that there are a lot of people in the F1 paddock who are willing to claim that the overspend is in the 7-figure range, but that doesn't matter. What counts is what the cost cap administration decides, and we must wait for the specifics. But why does Red Bull think their numbers are correct and they haven't overspent? Red Bull's defense is pretty straightforward. All teams submit their financial information, and despite how complicated they will be, there will be a final cost estimate, discounting areas that count as excluded costs. Consequently, based on how it has reported the figures, Red Bull's bottom line figure is under the cost cap. Red Bull believes it has conformed because of this, and it's confident in the auditing process it used on itself. Why does the FIA think it did overspend? There are a few blatant indicators, but we can only assume. First off, Red Bull's response dispels any notion that this might be an instance of an accepted breach agreement. When the team and the cost cap panel agree that there has been a procedure violation or an overspending, they also agree on the appropriate punishment. Williams broke the rules in this way and was penalised with a $25,000 fine. This indicates that the FIA does not think Red Bull's final calculation is accurate. However, since there are countless details in the voluminous paperwork about how this was calculated, it is likely that this is based on how the regulations have been applied to arrive at that number, rather than on the assumption that Red Bull is engaging in some hidden or fraudulent activity. The FIA statement did note, all competitors acted at all times in a spirit of good faith and cooperation throughout the process. What can Red Bull do to fight the verdict? Red Bull promised to collaborate with the FIA moving forward to follow the right protocol in an emphatic yet cooperative statement. Reaching an agreed breach agreement with Red Bull would probably be the cost cap administration's first option of course of action, as it is currently determining the appropriate measures to be taken. That would probably require Red Bull to acknowledge that its interpretation of some financial requirement was wrong. It's crucial to remember that the approved violation agreement would not only result in a less severe punishment, but also cannot be objected to by anyone. An acceptable breach agreement now looks doubtful, given that Red Bull has made clear that it intends to contest this. That indicates that it will defend its analysis and submission, saying that the method it used to determine its cost cap spending number is accurate. If it's unable to do so and refuses to sign any recognized breach agreement, the cost cap administration may decide and impose a penalty. Red Bull might challenge that in court, and there's always the nuclear option of taking it to a real-world judge. But what happens if Red Bull win in court and overturn the FIA verdict? If Red Bull's cost cap submission is ultimately found to be accurate, it will undoubtedly establish a standard for how it reports some of its expenses. This implies that other teams working within the cost cap will be able to do the same, and undoubtedly will if it has a positive impact. It is inevitable that this will lead to clarifications in the interpretation and application of the rules. It's also crucial to keep in mind that it's completely feasible that Red Bull's proposal is correct in accordance with the guidelines as written. Given that Red Bull is eager to argue over the specifics of its application with the cost cap administration, that would suggest the team thinks its interpretations are defendable and so acceptable under the rules. Let's not forget that the wording in the rules has been interpreted in many ways over all these years in F1. Just look at some of the developments we saw this year, or how the Japanese GP ended with full points. So we can't rule this one out, and it would yet be another FIA blunder if this turns out to be the truth. How long will this process take? Given the ongoing correspondence between the teams and the cost cap administration, Red Bull was likely aware of concerns over certain areas of its filings. But now that it has officially been determined that a slight violation of the cost cap has been made, this transitions to the following stage. The cost cap administration will probably desire a speedy settlement, given the increased stakes. But it might take some time if it boils down to protracted technical disputes on the wording of the rules and accounting. Therefore, how tenaciously Red Bull will defend its position will be a major determinant in how quickly this will be settled. And knowing Horner and Red Bull, they'll probably take their time on fighting this verdict. What does this mean for the cost cap regulations? It's possible that this first significant test scenario demonstrates how strong and testable financial regulations are. Even if Red Bull is successful in defending its stance, that might allow the rules to be tightened going forward. It could jeopardize the integrity and future of the cost cap if there is a proven overspend, and the punishment is not or cannot be as severe as the cost cap administration wants it to be. Keep in mind that this issue is part of a much larger political background. The FIA's transparency and regulatory ability will also be put to the test under Mohammed bin Sulayem's leadership. What are the possible penalties? The following are the potential penalties, which range from a fine to disqualification. A fine. Financial penalty to be determined on a case-by-case basis. Public reprimand. Deduction of Constructors' Championship points. Deduction of Drivers' Championship points. Suspension from one or more stage of a season, such as qualifying but excluding the race. Aerodynamic testing capability reduced. Reduction in future cost cap limit. The worst case scenario for the Drivers' Championship in 2021 is a possible point deduction, because it would imply changing the outcomes of a season that was already disputed after the 2021 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. With a reduction in future cost caps and development time appearing to be the likely consequence when they are published later. But how did Red Bull respond to this news, as they seem stubborn in accepting that they overspent? Red Bull's response. The team contends that they are below the cost cap threshold and that the relevant costs do not exceed the cost cap threshold for 2021. The statement reads, "We note the findings by the FIA of minor overspend breaches of the financial regulations with surprise and disappointment. Our 2021 submission was below the cost cap limit, so we need to carefully review the FIA's findings as our belief remains that the relevant costs are under the 2021 cost cap amount." Red Bull team principal Christian Horner threatened legal action because of the defamatory claims made against the team, which had been the subject of much discussion over the previous several weekends regarding whether the team had indeed exceeded the cost cap. They reiterate their conjecture and positioning of others in the statement and promise to adhere to the FIA procedure. Despite the conjecture and positioning of others, there is of course a process under the regulations with the FIA, which we will respectfully follow while we consider all the options available to us. For now, we'll have to wait until the FIA and Red Bull work out what will happen. Will Red Bull come to an agreement with the FIA, or will they fight the verdict? We will find out soon. What do you think will happen to Red Bull? Are they going to overturn the verdict, or will they receive a penalty? Let us know your thoughts after hearing the facts in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video if you've enjoyed watching it and subscribe to stay updated with the latest F1 news. We'll see you in the next video.